The massive space station Concordia Prime floated in the black void like a crystal jewel against the stars. Inside its gleaming halls, representatives from 12 different alien species sat around a circular table that stretched nearly 50 meters across. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime to convert dozens of languages into something resembling understanding. Captain Jake Morrison adjusted his crisp blue uniform and tried to keep his face neutral as ambassador. Zethkari spoke. The reptilian Vorthan delegate stood nearly 3 meters tall, his scaled skin shimmering under the artificial lights. His yellow eyes looked down at the human section with barely concealed disgust. The humans propose what they call a trade corridor. Through Sector 7, Zethkari said, his voice carrying the wet clicking sounds of his native tongue even through the translator. This is amusing. They think their primitive cargo ships can compete with our advanced vessels. Dr. Lisa Hamilton sat beside Morrison, her tablet displaying months of careful research. She had spent weeks preparing detailed proposals for cultural exchange programs, trade agreements, and joint scientific ventures. Her green eyes narrowed as she watched the alien delegates around. The table nodded in agreement with Zethkari's dismissive words. The ethereal delegate, Senator Verlanash, floated in his containment field like a cloud of glowing gas. His voice came through speakers mounted around his position. The human proposals show a fundamental misunderstanding of galactic commerce. Perhaps they should focus on learning from more advanced species before attempting to contribute meaningfully to these discussions. Morrison felt his jaw tighten. 3 months. 3 months of sitting in these chairs, listening to condescending remarks and watching their carefully prepared proposals get dismissed without proper consideration. The Rim Wars had started when human colonists tried to establish settlements in what they thought was unclaimed space. The aliens had responded with overwhelming force, treating the humans like children who had wandered into the wrong playground. High Counselor Mirthek clicked his mandibles together in what Morrison had learned was the insectoid equivalent of laughter. The hive mind representative spoke through several mouths at once, creating an eerie chorus effect. The humans' military tactics during the recent conflicts were particularly entertaining. They fight like barely evolved apes, using brute force where finesse is required. Several other delegates made sounds that Morrison's translator identified as amusement. The crystalline delegate's body flashed with colors that meant approval. The aquatic representative's tentacles writhed in what their species used to express. HUMO, or Dr. Hamilton leaned forward, her voice steady despite the insult. Perhaps if we could discuss our cultural exchange proposal, you might find that human perspectives offer unique value. We have developed innovative solutions to problems that other species have struggled with for centuries. Innovative solutions, Zethkari repeated, his tongue flicking out to taste the air. Yes, we have observed human innovation. Your species' tendency to solve problems by hitting them with bigger hammers is well documented. Morrison watched Hamilton's face flush red, but she maintained her professional composure. Our proposal includes shared research facilities, joint exploration missions, and collaborative development of new technologies. Human creativity combined with alien knowledge could benefit everyone. The gaseous delegate from the Nebula Collective pulsed with dim light. Human creativity is limited by their biological constraints. Their short lifespans prevent them from developing the long-term thinking required for meaningful galactic cooperation. Short lifespans and shorter tempers, added the Vorthan military attach. Earning more approving sounds from around the table, Morrison had been a soldier before becoming a diplomat. He had fought in the Rim Wars, watched good men and women die because these same aliens had decided human expansion was unacceptable. Now he sat in their crystal palace, listening to them mock the sacrifice of his people while demanding humanity accept whatever scraps they were willing to offer. Dr. Hamilton tried again, her voice growing slightly strained. If we could focus on the economic benefits of cooperation, the projections show that integrated human-alien trade networks could increase efficiency by 30% across all participating species. High Counselor Mirthak's multiple voices buzzed with what Morrison recognized as dismissal. Human mathematical models are simplistic. They fail to account for the complex variables that advanced species consider routine. The ethereal delegates. Containment field brightened. Perhaps the humans would benefit from a period of observation before attempting to contribute to these discussions. They could learn much by watching how civilized species conduct themselves. That was the moment Morrison felt something snap inside his chest. He had been a career military officer, trained to follow orders and maintain discipline under pressure. But sitting in this room, watching these aliens treat his species like amusing pets, pushed him past his breaking point. Senator Vrillanash continued speaking, his gaseous form pulsing with self-importance. The human delegation should be grateful for the opportunity to learn from their betters. This experience will help them understand their proper place in the galactic community. The word betters hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. Morrison could feel Hamilton tense beside him, her knuckles white as she gripped her tablet. Around the table, alien delegates nodded and made approving sounds. Clearly pleased with this assessment of human worth, Morrison stood slowly, his chair scraping against the polished floor. The sound cut through the conversation like a blade, and suddenly every eye, sensor, and optical organ in the room focused on him. He reached for the neat stack of proposals the human delegation had brought. Documents representing months of careful preparation and genuine hope for peaceful cooperation. "Captain Morrison," Dr. Hamilton whispered. Uncertainty creeping into her voice, he ignored her, gathering the papers with deliberate care. Each document represented hours of work, detailed plans for mutual benefit, scientific collaboration, and cultural understanding. The aliens had dismissed every single proposal without serious consideration. Ambassador Zefkari's tongue flicked out again, tasting the sudden tension in the air. The human delegate appears agitated. Perhaps the complexity of our discussions has overwhelmed his primitive neural pathways. Morrison looked around the table, meeting the gaze of each delegate in turn. The crystalline being's faceted surface reflected his image dozens of times. The aquatic representative's tentacles had stopped moving, sensing the change in atmosphere. Even the hive mind's constant chittering had quieted. "We came here in good faith," Morrison said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. "We offered compromise, cooperation, and peace. We brought detailed proposals for mutual benefit, cultural exchange, and joint scientific advancement." He tucked the papers under his arm and looked directly at High Counselor Mirthuk. "Since you clearly have no interest in treating us as equals, we'll show you what happens when humans stop playing nice." The silence that followed was complete. Even the station's background hum seemed to pause as Morrison turned toward the exit. Dr. Hamilton scrambled to gather her materials, her face pale but determined as she followed her captain's lead. "This is highly irregular," Senator Vrillanash sighed, his gaseous form flickering with agitation. "The human delegation cannot simply leave in the middle of negotiations." Morrison paused at the chamber's entrance, his hand on the door control. "These stopped being negotiations the moment you decided we weren't worth listening to." He pressed the control and the doors slid open with a soft hiss. "Consider this humanity's formal withdrawal from the Galactic Council's peace process." As the doors closed behind them, Morrison could hear the explosion of alien voices, translation devices struggling to keep up with the sudden chaos of multiple species talking at once, but he didn't look back. He had spent 3 months learning exactly what these aliens thought of humanity. Now it was time to show them what humanity thought of them. The news traveled through human space faster than light itself. Within 6 hours of Captain Morrison's dramatic exit from Concordia Prime, every human colony, outpost, and military installation had received the same message. The Galactic Council had shown their true colors, and humanity would no longer pretend to be interested in their version of peace. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the command center of Earth's orbital defense platform, watching the cascade of green lights on her status board. Each light represented a human fleet group acknowledging their new orders. Her silver hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her steel gray eyes showed no emotion as she watched humanity's military machine shift into a new configuration. Operation Exodus is proceeding on schedule, reported Commander Hayes from his position at the tactical station. All Outer Rim fleets have begun withdrawal to defensive positions. Colonial governors are implementing fortress protocols as ordered. Sullivan nodded, her hands clasped behind her back. She had been fighting aliens for 30 years, ever since the first contact wars when humanity learned they were not alone in the galaxy. Back then, they had been naive enough to believe that intelligence meant wisdom, that advanced technology meant advanced morality. The Rim Wars had taught them differently, and now the peace talks had driven the lesson home with brutal clarity. On Earth, President Linda Carter stood before the United Earth Assembly, her voice carrying to every corner of human space through quantum communication networks. She was a small woman with fierce brown eyes and graying hair, but her presence filled the vast chamber as she addressed the representatives of humanity's colonies and worlds. For 3 months, our best diplomats sat at that table, Carter said. Her words measured and deliberate. They listened to aliens mock our culture, dismiss our achievements, and treat us like children who had wandered into the wrong room. They called us primitive apes, suggested we needed to learn our proper place, and laughed at the sacrifice of our people during the Rim Wars. The chamber was silent except for the soft hum of recording equipment. Every human world would hear these words. Every colony would understand what came next. Today, we flipped that table over, Carter continued, her voice growing stronger. If they want to see what primitive apes can do when we stop trying to be civilized, they're about to get a demonstration they'll never forget. General Rick Stone sat in his underground command bunker, studying holographic displays that showed the movement of human forces across dozens of star systems. He was a thin man with sharp features and calculating eyes, the kind of person who saw warfare as a complex puzzle to be solved rather than a simple application of force. The aliens think they understand us, Stone said to his staff officers. They watched us fight in the Rim Wars and decided we were crude, unsophisticated, predictable. They saw us try diplomacy and concluded we were weak. Both assessments were exactly what we wanted them to think. Colonel Ben Parker's special operations teams were already moving through neutral space, their ships running silent and dark. Parker was a compact man with scars on his hands and a reputation for making impossible missions look routine. His teams had been preparing for this moment since the peace talks began, gathering intelligence and positioning assets while the aliens assumed humanity was serious about negotiation. Phase 1 insertions are complete, Parker reported through encrypted channels. All surveillance packages are in place. We now have eyes and ears in every major alien system. Back on Concordia Prime, the alien delegates were still trying to process what had happened. Ambassador Zethkari stood in the now empty conference chamber, his yellow eyes staring at the vacant human seats. The smooth table surface still bore the faint impressions where Dr. Hamilton's tablet had rested, where Captain Morrison's papers had been carefully arranged. "This is unacceptable," Zethkari said, his voice carrying the wet clicking sounds of agitation. "The humans cannot simply walk away from their obligations. They started the Rim Wars with their illegal expansion, and now they refuse to accept the consequences." High Counselor Mirthak's multiple voices buzzed with what might have been uncertainty. The human behavior was unexpected. They're diplomatic. Records showed a strong preference for negotiated solutions. This aggressive response does not match their psychological profile. Senator Verlanash's gaseous form flickered with colors that indicated confusion. Perhaps the humans are attempting to negotiate from a position of artificial strength. They will return when they realize their mistake. The ethereal delegate was wrong, but the aliens would not understand that for several more months. Across human space, the withdrawal continued with military precision. Human cargo ships disappeared from alien trade routes. Human diplomatic staff packed their belongings and departed from alien worlds. Human listening posts went dark, their automated systems broadcasting simple messages that said only, "Do not follow." Dr. Lisa Hamilton found herself back on Earth's surfaced for the first time in 2 years, working in a classified research facility beneath the Rocky Mountains. The laboratory was filled with alien technology captured during the Rim Wars, devices that had been studied and reverse-engineered by human scientists who were apparently much more clever than the aliens had realized. "The translation algorithms are complete," Hamilton reported to her new supervisor, Dr. Pete Williams. "We now have full access to their military communications, their technical specifications, and their strategic planning documents." Williams was a man who looked more like a college professor than a weapons researcher, with thick glasses and rumpled clothes. But his work combining human ingenuity with alien technology had produced innovations that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. "Excellent," Williams said, adjusting his glasses. "The adaptive weapon systems are ready for field testing, and the stealth technology is performing beyond our most optimistic projections. When the time comes, we'll be ready to show them what human primitive thinking can accomplish." On the frontier worlds, human colonists watched their orbital defenses come online with systems that had never been there before, energy shields that could deflect the most advanced alien weapons, sensor networks that could detect ships at impossible distances, automated manufacturing facilities that could produce military equipment from raw materials in a matter of hours. The aliens had assumed that humanity's industrial base was limited, that their technology was crude, that their strategic thinking was simple. They had made these assumptions based on what they had observed during the Rim Wars and the peace talks. What they did not understand was that humans were very good at showing people exactly what they wanted to see. Admiral Sullivan received reports from across human space as Operation Exodus reached its final phase. Every human ship, every human citizen, every human asset had been withdrawn from alien-controlled territory. The message was clear and simple. If the aliens wanted to treat humanity as an enemy, then humanity would oblige them. "All units report ready status," Commander Hayes announced from his station. "Human space is now officially closed to alien traffic. Any vessel attempting to enter our territory will be warned once, then destroyed." Sullivan nodded, her expression unchanging. She had been waiting for this moment since the first alien ship had fired on human colonists in the Rim Wars. The peace talks had been humanity's good faith effort to find another way, but the aliens had made their choice clear. "Send a message to all fleet commands," Sullivan ordered. "Operation Exodus is complete. Phase 2 begins on my signal." President Carter's final words to the Earth Assembly were broadcast across human space and picked up by alien monitoring stations. The message was simple, direct, and delivered with the kind of cold precision that would have made the aliens reconsider their assumptions about human nature, if they had been smart enough to listen. "We tried to be your partners," Carter said. "We offered cooperation, trade, and friendship. You responded with contempt, mockery, and condescension. Now you'll learn what happens when humans stop pretending to be civilized." The transmission ended and human space went dark. No more diplomatic communications, no more trade negotiations, no more attempts at peaceful coexistence. The aliens had wanted to see what primitive apes could do when pushed too far. They were about to find out. 6 months had passed since the humans walked away from the peace talks, and the galaxy was starting to feel their absence in ways the alien leaders had never expected. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for decades were now experiencing constant delays and equipment failures. Communication networks that had connected distant worlds were suffering mysterious blackouts that lasted for days at a time. Fleet Admiral Kethmore stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his tactical display with growing frustration. The proud Vorthan military leader had commanded fleets for over 2 centuries, but the past few months had tested his patience like nothing before. His scaled face showed the stress of dealing with problems that seemed to have no logical solution. "Report," Kethmore ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never questioned his own superiority. "Another convoy has gone missing in Sector 12, his tactical officer replied, his own scales shifting to darker colors that indicated worry. "That makes 17 cargo ships in the past month." No distress signals, no debris, no indication of what happened to them. Kethmar's yellow eyes narrowed as he studied the star chart. The missing ships had all been traveling through space that was now empty since the humans had withdrawn. Before the peace talks collapsed, human cargo vessels had maintained regular patrol schedules in those regions, claiming they were protecting trade routes from pirates and system failures. Pirates, Kethmar said dismissively. The humans were probably working with them all along. Now that their protection racket has ended, the criminals are free to attack our shipping. But even as he spoke the words, Kethmar knew they did not make sense. The missing ships included heavily armed military transports that should have been able to handle any pirate attack. More troubling was the complete lack of evidence. Pirates left wreckage, demanded ransom, or tried to sell captured cargo. These ships had simply vanished as if they had never existed on the gas giant Ethereal Prime. Trade Minister Ylandra floated in her private chambers, reviewing economic reports that made less sense each day. Her luminous form pulsed with colors that indicated deep concern as she studied the data flowing across her holographic displays. The numbers were impossible to ignore. Galactic trade efficiency had dropped by 30% since the humans left. Manufacturing output was down 25%. Even basic communication between worlds was becoming unreliable. The Ethereal had always prided themselves on their superior intellect, but Ylandra was beginning to suspect they had made a serious miscalculation. The human trade algorithms were more sophisticated than we realized, she admitted to her assistant, a younger Ethereal whose form flickered with surprise at this revelation. And their ships did not just carry cargo. They served as mobile communication relays, system maintenance platforms, and coordination hubs for interstellar commerce. The assistant's glow dimmed with what might have been embarrassment. But High Counselor, Mirthuk assured us that human methods were primitive and inefficient. He said their withdrawal would allow superior species to optimize galactic trade. Ylandra's form pulsed with bitter irony. The High Counselor's hive mind thinks in terms of centralized control and predetermined patterns. They could not understand that the humans were using distributed intelligence and adaptive systems. What we dismissed as chaos was actually a more advanced form of organization. Deep in Vorthan space, Commander Troy Jensen moved through the darkness between stars like a ghost hunting its prey. His ship, the UES Phantom, was invisible to alien sensors thanks to technology that combined human engineering with captured alien components. Jensen was a compact man with dark hair and patient eyes, the kind of person who could wait motionless for hours until the perfect moment to strike. Target acquired, his sensor officer reported quietly. Vorthan heavy cruiser, traveling alone through the Kepler system. Jensen studied the alien vessel through his enhanced optics. It was a beautiful ship, all smooth curves and gleaming metal, designed by a species that valued aesthetic perfection. It was also completely unaware that it was being watched by predators, who had learned to hunt in the dark. Maintain position, Jensen ordered. We observe only. The Admiral wants detailed intelligence on their new patrol patterns. The Phantom had been observing alien movements for months, gathering information that would prove invaluable when the time came to act. Jensen and his crew had watched alien fleets fumble through formations that made no sense, seen them struggle with equipment that should have been routine to operate, and recorded their increasingly desperate attempts to compensate for missing human expertise. Back on Earth, Dr. Amy Brooks worked in laboratories that had been carved out of solid rock beneath the Australian desert. Her research team had been given unlimited resources and a simple mandate: develop weapons that could defeat any alien technology they might encounter. Brooks was a woman in her 40s with graying hair and intense green eyes, someone who approached warfare as a scientific problem to be solved. The adaptive targeting system is complete, Brooks reported to General Stone during their weekly briefing. Our weapons can now analyze alien defensive systems in real time and modify their attack patterns accordingly. No matter what kind of shields or armor they develop, our systems will find a way through. Stone nodded, his thin face showing satisfaction. What about the stealth technology? Beyond our most optimistic projections, Brooks replied, pulling up holographic displays that showed test results. We can make entire fleets invisible to alien sensors. They might detect gravitational anomalies if they know exactly where to look, but their standard scanning methods will show empty space. The general studied the data with the calculating gaze of someone who had spent his career turning technology into tactical advantage. How long before we can equip the full fleet? 3 months for the stealth systems, 2 months for the adaptive weapons, Brooks said. But sir, I have to ask, are we really going to use these against civilian populations? Stones. Expression did not change. Dr. Brooks, the aliens had 6 months to reconsider their position. They could have sent diplomatic messages, offered apologies, or shown any sign that they understood their mistake. Instead, they have been celebrating what they think is humanity's defeat while trying to expand into the territory we abandoned. On Concordia Prime, the alien delegates who had dismissed humanity so casually were finally beginning to understand that something was wrong. Ambassador Zethkari stood in the same conference chamber where Captain Morrison had walked out 6 months earlier, but now the room felt different. The confident arrogance that had filled the space during the peace talks had been replaced by uncertainty and growing fear. The human ships are out there, Zethkari said, his voice carrying worry for the first time in his long career. Our sensors cannot detect them, but they are watching us. Every convoy that disappears, every communication relay that fails, every system that malfunctions without explanation, the humans are behind it all. High Counselor Mirthok's multiple voices buzzed with what might have been the first doubt his hive mind had ever experienced. The humans lack the technological sophistication for such operations. Their species is barely 3 centuries into space travel. They cannot possibly have developed stealth technology superior to our own. Senator Villanash's gaseous form flickered with colors that indicated deep unease. Perhaps we underestimated their capabilities. The trade disruptions alone suggest they understood galactic commerce far better than we gave them credit for. The crystalline delegate's faceted surface reflected the room's lighting in patterns that showed stress. My people have detected gravitational anomalies consistent with cloaked vessels in 17 different systems. The signatures are unlike anything in our databases. Zethkari's tongue flicked out to taste the air, a nervous habit he had developed over the past few months. I have been reviewing the peace talk recordings. The humans never lost their temper, never showed fear, never acted like a species that was truly defeated. They were calm, controlled, professional. They behaved like people who had already decided what they were going to do. The realization hung in the chamber like a toxic cloud. The aliens had been so confident in their own superiority that they had failed to recognize the warning signs. The humans had not stormed out of the peace talks in anger. They had left because they had learned everything they needed to know about their enemies. They were studying us, Mirthok said, his multiple voices creating an eerie harmony of understanding. The entire time they sat at this table, they were learning our weaknesses, mapping our systems, analyzing our capabilities. The peace talks were not a negotiation for them. They were reconnaissance. Outside in the depths of space, human ships moved like shadows between the stars, carrying weapons that could adapt to any defense and technology that made them invisible to alien sensors. The aliens had wanted to see what primitive apes could do when they stopped trying to be civilized. Soon they would have their answer. The attack began at exactly midnight, Galactic Standard Time, across 12 different star systems simultaneously. Captain Ryan Clark sat in the command chair of the UES Retribution, watching his tactical display as human ships materialized from empty space like ghosts becoming solid. His dark eyes showed no emotion as he gave the order that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. "All units, commence Operation Reckoning," Clark said quietly into his communicator. "Show them what happens when humans stop playing." Nice. The Retribution was invisible to Vorthan sensors as it approached their primary naval facility at Kepler Station. The massive alien base housed 3 full battle fleets and was considered the most secure military installation in Vorthan. Space. Admiral Kethmore himself was stationed there. Confident that no enemy could possibly threaten such a heavily defended position, Clark had been studying this base for 6 months, watching patrol patterns, analyzing defensive systems, and mapping every weakness his sensors could detect. The humans had learned during the peace talks that the Vorthan loved symmetry and predictable patterns. Their military formations were beautiful to watch and completely vulnerable to anyone who understood mathematics better than they did. "Weapon systems online," reported his tactical officer, Major Sarah Kim. "Adaptive targeting is locked onto their shield generators. The AI has calculated 17 different attack vectors that will bypass their defenses." Kim was a woman who had lost her brother during the Rim Wars, killed by Vorthan weapons while defending a human colony. She had volunteered for this mission with the kind of cold determination that came from personal experience with alien cruelty. Her fingers moved across her control panel with the precision of someone who had been waiting years for this moment. "Fire," Clark ordered. The human weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They analyzed alien defensive systems in real time, adapting their frequency, intensity, and approach angle to penetrate whatever protection they encountered. The Vorthan shields, designed to stop conventional energy weapons, were useless against attacks that changed their fundamental nature mid-flight. Kepler Station's defensive grid died in silence, its massive shield generators overloading from weapons they could not understand or counter. The base's automated systems sent desperate distress signals that were immediately jammed by human electronic warfare specialists who had been waiting months for this opportunity. Admiral Kethmore stood on his command deck, watching his tactical displays turn red as system after system reported catastrophic failures. The proud Vorthan leader had commanded fleets for 2 centuries, but nothing in his experience had prepared him for an enemy that could appear from nowhere and strike with weapons that made his defenses irrelevant. "How are they doing this?" Kethmore demanded, his voice carrying the kind of desperate anger that came from a lifetime of certainty being destroyed in minutes. "Our sensors show no enemy ships, but our entire defensive network is being systematically destroyed." His tactical officer's scales had shifted to the pale colors that indicated terror. "Sir, the weapons are adapting faster than our systems can compensate. Each time we modify our shields, their attacks change to match. It is as if they are learning from our defenses in real time." That was exactly what was happening, though Kethmore would not understand the implications until much later. Dr. Amy Brooks had spent months developing artificial intelligence systems that could analyze alien technology and develop countermeasures in seconds rather than years. The weapons striking Kepler Station were not just advanced. They were intelligent, 3,000 light-years away. Major Sarah Kim led her strike team through the corridors of a crystalline research facility that housed their most advanced computer systems. The aliens had built their base inside a hollowed-out asteroid, thinking that isolation would provide security. They had not considered that humans were very good at operating in hostile environments. Kim's team moved with the silent efficiency of soldiers who had trained for this mission for months. Each member wore powered armor that made them invisible to crystalline sensors while providing enhanced strength and speed. They carried weapons designed specifically to neutralize crystalline defensive systems without harming the alien researchers inside. "Target the main computer core," Kim whispered into her communicator. "We need their research data intact, but their ability to share it with other species ends today." The crystalline base had been chosen because it coordinated research projects across dozens of alien worlds. Dr. Pete Williams had identified it as a critical node in the Galactic Information Network. Destroying it would blind the aliens to human capabilities while giving humanity access to centuries of advanced research. Kim's team reached the computer core without encountering any resistance. The crystalline had never imagined that someone could infiltrate their most secure facility, so they had focused their defenses on preventing external attacks rather than internal threats. It was the kind of strategic oversight that humans had learned to exploit during months of careful observation. Charges placed, reported Sergeant Davis, a compact man who had specialized in demolitions since the Rim Wars. The core will be destroyed, but all data will be copied to our systems first. The aliens will lose everything, but we will keep their research. On the gas giant Ethereal Prime, Commander Johnson's engineering team was implementing a different kind of attack. They had infiltrated the planetary communication network 6 months earlier, using access codes obtained during the peace talks when Dr. Hamilton had proposed joint research projects. The Ethereal had dismissed her ideas as primitive, never realizing she was actually mapping their systems. Initiating cascade failure, Johnson reported from his hidden position in the planet's upper atmosphere. Their entire communication grid will overload in approximately 10 minutes. The Ethereal will be cut off from their colonies for at least 6 months. Johnson was an engineer who understood that sometimes the most effective weapon was not a gun, but a screwdriver applied to the right circuit at the right time. The Ethereal communication system was a marvel of advanced technology, but it had been designed by people who thought in terms of elegant solutions rather than defensive redundancy. Dr. Pete Williams monitored the attacks from his command center on Earth, watching as human forces demonstrated what 6 months of preparation could accomplish when directed by people who truly understood their enemies. Williams looked more like a college professor than a military strategist, but his combination of technical expertise and tactical insight had made Operation Reckoning possible. Phase 1 is complete, Williams reported to Admiral Sullivan. All primary targets have been neutralized. The aliens have lost 60% of their military capability and 80% of their coordination ability. They cannot effectively respond to our attacks or communicate with their scattered forces. Sullivan nodded, her expression unchanged despite the magnitude of what had just been accomplished. Casualties? 0 human losses, Williams replied. The aliens never saw us coming. Their sensors detected nothing, their weapons hit nothing, their communications reached nothing. As far as they know, their systems are failing for unknown reasons. That was the most terrifying aspect of Operation Reckoning from the alien perspective. They were not being defeated by an enemy they could see and fight. Their bases were being destroyed by invisible attackers using incomprehensible weapons. Their fleets were being disabled by forces that appeared from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. Ambassador Zethkari received the first reports while sitting in his private chambers on Concordia Prime, the reptilian diplomat who had mocked human capabilities just months earlier now found himself reading damage assessments that made no logical sense. 12 major alien facilities had been attacked simultaneously by forces that their sensors could not detect. This is impossible, Zethkari said to his aide, his voice carrying the kind of shock that came from having fundamental assumptions destroyed. The humans lack the technology for coordinated strikes across multiple star systems. They do not have the ships, the weapons, or the tactical ability to execute such operations. His aide's scales had shifted to colors that indicated pure terror. Sir, the reports are confirmed. Kepler Station has lost all defensive capability. The crystalline research facility has been completely destroyed. Ethereal Prime has been cut off from their colonies. The attacks were precise, coordinated, and executed with technology that we cannot explain. Zethkari stared at the reports, finally beginning to understand what the humans had actually been doing during those 6 months of silence. They had not been hiding in fear or licking their wounds after the failed peace talks. They had been preparing for war with the methodical patience of a species that understood how to turn apparent weakness into overwhelming strength. Send an emergency message to High Counselor Mirthak, Zethkari ordered, his voice barely controlled. Tell him the humans have made their position clear. We need to discuss terms for a new peace treaty immediately. But it was already too late for peace talks. The humans had tried diplomacy and been treated like amusing children. 6 months after Operation Reckoning, the galaxy looked very different than it had when Captain Morrison walked out of those peace talks. The massive space station that now dominated the orbit around Earth was called New Harmony, and it made Concordia Prime look like a child's toy by comparison. Its gleaming hull stretched for kilometers in every direction, Incorporating technology from a dozen alien species that had been improved by human engineering. President Linda Carter stood at the center of the station's council chamber, watching alien delegates file into seats that had been carefully arranged to show the new order of galactic civilization. The chamber was beautiful, with flowing lines and artistic touches that demonstrated human appreciation for aesthetic design. But every alien in the room understood that they were looking at a structure built by the species they had once dismissed. As primitive apes, Ambassador Zethkari moved slowly to his assigned seat, his once proud bearing reduced to the careful movements of someone who knew he was completely outmatched. The reptilian diplomat who had mocked human proposals now waited quietly for permission to speak, his yellow eyes fixed on the floor rather than meeting the gaze of his human hosts. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood beside President Carter, wearing the insignia of Supreme Fleet Commander of the Galactic Defense Force. Her silver hair was still pulled back in the same tight bun, but now her uniform bore decorations from a dozen alien worlds that had formerly requested human protection. The woman who had once defended Earth against alien attacks now commanded fleets that protected the entire galaxy under human authority. Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished representatives of all species, Carter began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's advanced acoustics. We gather today to formalize the new structure of galactic civilization. 6 months ago, many of you learned what happens when humans are pushed beyond their limits. Today, we establish the framework that will ensure such misunderstandings never happen again. High Counselor Mirthak's multiple voices buzzed with what might have been relief or resignation. The insectoid representative who had once suggested humans should be grateful to learn from their betters now spoke with the careful tone of someone who understood exactly how far he had fallen. The Hive Collective formally acknowledges human leadership in all matters of galactic security and trade coordination, Mirthak said, his words translated into dozens of languages for representatives who had once considered human communication methods crude and inefficient. We recognize that our previous assessment of human capabilities was based on incomplete information and poor judgment. Senator Vrlanesh floated in his containment field, his gaseous form pulsing with colors that indicated submission rather than the arrogance he had once displayed. The ethereal delegate who had suggested humans needed to learn their proper place now waited for human approval before speaking about his own species' needs. The Ethereal Confederation requests permission to resume limited trade operations under human oversight, Vrlanesh said, his voice lacking any trace of the condescension that had once characterized his communications. We understand that all commercial activities must be approved by human administrators and conducted according to human standards. Captain Jake Morrison entered the chamber wearing the insignia of Supreme Galactic Mediator, a position that had been created specifically for him after the alien governments requested human leadership in all diplomatic matters. The man who had walked out of peace talks in disgust now returned as the final authority on all interspecies negotiations. The new trade agreements have been reviewed and approved, Morrison announced, consulting a tablet that contained economic projections, showing human colonies thriving while alien worlds struggled to meet the quotas assigned to them. Human oversight has increased efficiency by 40% across all participating systems. Those species that have fully embraced human leadership are seeing unprecedented prosperity. Dr. Lisa Hamilton stood at a specialized podium designed to address the needs of multiple alien species simultaneously. The woman who had once tried to propose cultural exchange programs now supervised the implementation of human educational standards across dozens of worlds. Her green eyes showed satisfaction as she reviewed reports from alien schools where human languages had become mandatory subjects. Cultural integration programs are proceeding ahead of schedule, Hamilton reported. Human educational methods are being adopted by 87% of participating worlds. Student performance has improved dramatically since the implementation of human teaching techniques. We are particularly pleased with the progress shown by younger aliens who are learning to think more like humans. The crystalline delegates' faceted surface reflected the chamber's lighting in patterns that showed complete submission. The being who had once dismissed human mathematical models now spoke in careful, measured tones about the need for continued human guidance in scientific research. The crystalline synthesis formally requests human supervision of our research programs, the delegate said. Our previous work was limited by our inability to understand human approaches to problem solving. We now recognize that human creativity and adaptability are essential for meaningful scientific advancement. Dr. Pete Williams addressed the assembly from his position as Director of Galactic Technology Integration. His rumpled appearance and thick glasses remained unchanged, but now he oversaw research programs that combined the best alien knowledge with human innovation. The results had produced technological advances that surpassed anything the galaxy had seen in centuries. The integration of human and alien technologies has exceeded all projections, Williams reported. Human adaptive systems combined with alien manufacturing capabilities have created unprecedented possibilities for advancement. However, all research must continue under human direction to ensure optimal results. General Rickstone maintained his position as supreme military strategist, coordinating defense efforts across star systems that had once been enemies of humanity. His thin face showed satisfaction as he reviewed reports from alien military commanders, who now followed human tactical doctrines with the enthusiasm of converts to a new religion. Galactic defense networks are now fully integrated under human command, Stone announced. Former alien military assets have been reorganized according to human strategic principles. The result is a defensive capability that far exceeds what any individual species could have achieved alone. The transformation was complete, but it had not been accomplished through simple conquest. The aliens had not been enslaved or destroyed. Instead, they had been given exactly what they had claimed to want during those peace talks: the opportunity to learn from a superior species. The irony was lost on none of them. President Carter's final address to the reformed Galactic Council carried the weight of absolute authority, but it was delivered with the calm professionalism that had always characterized human diplomacy, even when the aliens had been too arrogant to recognize it. The new galactic order is not based on conquest or revenge, Carter said, her words being recorded for broadcast to every world in human space and beyond. It is based on the simple recognition of reality. Humans have proven themselves capable of leadership, innovation, and strategic thinking that surpasses what other species have achieved. Those who embrace human guidance prosper. Those who resist it become irrelevant. Ambassador Zethkari raised one scaled hand in the gesture that indicated a request to speak. The motion was careful, respectful, completely different from the commanding presence he had once projected during the failed peace talks. The Vorthan Empire wishes to express our gratitude for human leadership, Zethkari said, his voice carrying genuine humility for the first time in his long career. We now understand that our previous behavior was based on ignorance and arrogance. We are honored to serve under human authority and hope to prove ourselves worthy of continued human guidance. Captain Morrison studied the alien diplomat with the same calm expression he had worn when walking out of the original peace talks. The difference was that now everyone in the chamber understood exactly what that calmness represented. It was not weakness or uncertainty. It was the patience of a species that thought several moves ahead while their opponents were still trying to understand the current position. Your request is noted and will be considered, Morrison said. Continued Vorthan participation in the galactic community depends on your ability to demonstrate that you have learned from your mistakes. Humans are willing to forgive past errors, but we do not forget them. The chamber fell silent as the implications of that statement settled over the assembled delegates. The humans were not cruel rulers, but they were not naive either. The galaxy now operated according to human principles, human standards, and human oversight. The species that had once mocked humanity's efforts at diplomacy now competed for human approval with the desperation of people who understood exactly how much they had lost. Dr. Hamilton's final report summarized the new reality with clinical precision. Human educational programs have successfully modified alien thinking patterns to be more compatible with galactic civilization.